races, their state races. Nah, I only vote for president and my vote doesn't count. So they are rationally choosing not to vote in this great country of ours. We can change all that. We can make every vote count.
Yeah, this is identical to Senator Eben had the same bill earlier that was struck in this committee. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay, and the bottom line of the bill is that you're basically doing away with the Electoral College without doing away with the Electoral College.
Yes, what it does is it uses Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution, which says that the legislature decides where all the electors go. And it uses them to say that if states totaling 270 electoral votes, namely the majority, the ones who decide the election, if that many join the compact, then they look at all 50 states in D.C., they add all the votes together, and they give their electoral votes to whoever wins the national popular vote. Now, we already have 196 electoral votes. We already have 16 states in D.C. that have signed up. Virginia would bring it to 209. It's very unlikely this would happen by 2020, to be fair, because we would need 61 more electoral votes by July 20th of this year. So I admit that's unlikely to happen, but it certainly could happen in time for 2024, and we could give every person a right to vote. You know, the whole winner-take-all system, that was not part of the founders' vision. The founders' vision, as we know, was that a bunch of, well, let's face it, wealthy white men who had property, and frankly, they got 3/5 more of a vote if they were slave owners, could get in a room and choose the president. And the founders didn't believe we'd have political parties. They think they would just decide based on virtue. Well, the founders didn't get everything right. 10 years later, they were wrong. 10 years later, they had the Adams-Jefferson race, and we had political parties, and we were off down the road. The whole idea of the winner-take-all system didn't come till about 50 years later. So people who say this isn't the vision of the founders, well, they didn't predict the winner-take-all system. They didn't predict a presidential election where 46 states got very few visits. And in fact, the majority of states got no presidential visits at all. So I think this will fix a real problem. I think it will allow every American to participate in our democracy. And here's the thing. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat in Mississippi or a Republican in California. Your vote will count if we have the national popular vote.
Senator Howe.
I just would like to move to report.
Well, and so there's a motion to report, but first we want to see if there are people here that want to speak to this issue.
Mr. Chair,
For
I just
or
have
against?
a question.
Yeah. Senator Reeves has a question.
So what do you do with the states that don't opt in and you have a close election and a recount? What happens then? What if those states don't report? How does the recount work?
So, Mr. Chairman, I understand the question to be if states don't report their election results? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if you have a popular vote and you have some states that write a bill and they say we're not going to report it to you, maybe it's Texas and Georgia, I don't know, pick a state, and they don't go along with this.
Okay.
What do you do on a close recount?
So, Mr. Chairman, I would say that I've never heard of a state saying we're not going to count the votes. Texas and Georgia both have statutes that say we count every vote. And they count them, and they have recounts, and they've done full state recounts. And all 50 states, they may have a governor's race. I've never heard of a case where a state says we're going to refuse to allow any of our voters cast any vote for president. I think that'd be a pretty extraordinary thing. But basically there's elections in all 50 states. In fact, I don't think they can legally do that because once a presidential ballot is there, those states' laws require them to have an election. They'd have to kind of shut down the election. And I don't think a lot of Texans and Georgians would be happy if they shut down the presidential election in that state. That's a pretty unusual hypothetical. It hasn't been posed to me before. I just don't think Texas and Georgia, I don't even think they'd be allowed to pass a law saying we're not going to have a presidential election because the Constitution requires it.
But Delegate Levine, how many states have to pass this for it to become effective nationwide?
Yes, so it has to have states totaling 270 electoral votes. So if Texas and Georgia don't join the compact, if that's the question, then this works just fine. Because if states totaling 270 join the compact, they look at the total vote of all 50 states, and they cast their 270 in a block, whoever wins the national popular vote, and it really doesn't matter how the other states cast their electoral vote because the winner of the popular vote wins the election.
So how many states, how many electoral votes have adopted this?
We have 196 electoral votes now. 16 states and D.C. have approved this. This goes back to 2006, 2007. This isn't a recent phenomenon.
What's your deadline to have it affect this fall's election?
July 20th of this year.
Do you think that'll happen?
I think it's unlikely we will get 270 electoral votes by July 20th.
This is more likely to happen for the 2024 election.
It's more likely to happen by the 2024 election,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Okay, well, there's a lot of people behind you, unless you've got more questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Senator Spruill's got a question.
A couple of questions. Number one,
Yes, sir.
then suppose Virginia popular votes goes for someone else, and we opt out. Then do we have to vote for Donald Trump? Would our electoral votes go to Donald Trump?
So the way it works is if there are not enough states that join the compact, if we get to 269, we don't get to 270, then everything stays the same way. Virginia casts its votes. We do winner take all in Virginia. And the election of 2020, for example, will be held exactly as every other election that's been held in the last 100 years. This only goes into effect.
I'm asking about Virginia. All I'm saying is
so if Virginia, whether Virginia joins the compact or not, unless we get 270 by July 20th, we're going under the old system. But let's say Virginia joins the compact or not, frankly, and enough states join the compact by 2024, then we're in the national popular vote system.
So and we don't count.
So we count as individuals, voters. Every vote counts. Every Democrat, every Republican, every voter in Virginia has their vote counted towards the national total. And that would be true for every one of the 50 states.
Senator Spruill.
It's a question then. So that means we are doing away with the electors. All right? So by doing it this way, we're doing away with the electors.
Well, technically the Electoral College would still be there, but in effect it would be the same result as doing away with the Electoral College, yes.
Thank you.
Now, we've got a bunch of people, and I'd ask you to be very succinct if you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jamelle Bouie. I'm a columnist for the New York Times, but I'm here specifically as a resident of Charlottesville and a native of the state. I want to speak to the concern around national popular vote that involves political minorities, that they might be swamped by larger states, that they may be swamped by political majorities elsewhere in the country. And the fact of the matter is that right now, under the winner-take-all electoral college system, if you are in the political minority in your state, if it's a 50.1, 49.9 election, if you're in that 49.9, your vote does not count. I think that's especially acute for racial minorities in Virginia. Up until 2008, Republican Party presidential candidates won this state's electoral votes, regardless of how many African Americans voted for the Democratic candidates. That was the case throughout the South. And the absence of any way to count those votes and have them really matter for the outcome effectively disenfranchised a large portion, and at one point a majority, of black voters in the country. And that is true for many different groups of voters. So I want to conclude by saying one way to think about this is it is making the votes of every single group, regardless of their relative place in their state's electorate, it's making those votes equal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Pam Berg. I am a resident of Alexandria, Virginia, and I am a constituent of Senator Adam Eben and Delegate Mark Levine. I am here today to speak on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Virginia. Chairman Deeds and committee members, the League of Women Voters of Virginia asks for the committee's support of the National Popular Vote, HB 177. For the past 100 years, the League has been guided by our core principles, one of the most cherished being that every citizen should be protected in the right to vote. Today, we continue the fight to ensure that every vote matters when electing the president. One person, one vote is an idea every Virginian and every American can get behind. The time has come for our president to be elected in this just and simple way. To pass this bill now is to be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Chairman and senators, thank you for giving me the opportunity today. I don't have to remind you that twice in the last 3 administrations, the president was chosen by a minority of the vote. But due to the Electoral College, they were elected. This general election, the winner of the presidency will be decided by 4 states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Please, let's make this the last time that only 4 states decide who will be the winning candidate for presidency. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This election behind this. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senators and Chairman, thank you. My name is Jeffrey Jacobs. I'm from Herndon, Virginia. And I want to remind you that we all know what happened in 2016. We all know what happened in 2000. Do we know what happened in 1888? Do we know what happened in 1876? Do we know what happened in 1824? Thank you, Senator. And do we know what happened in 1960? Because that election was very close too. And it was, of course, ceded to Kennedy. And, of course, in 2004, we almost had that happen again. So this is a problem that affects both Democrats and Republicans. It is not a partisan issue. And we ask that you consider this and pass this resolution. And finally, I just want to point out that this is a situation, in a way, that our nation is, in a sense, gerrymandered. Consider Bristow, Virginia versus Bristol, Tennessee. These are 2 communities, like communities, that are separated. Now, at the state level, and at the congressional level, at the legislative level, that makes sense. But at the presidential level, that doesn't make sense. They're a like community. They should be considered as one community, and that is essentially done through a national popular vote. Thank you.
Let me ask you, though.
Yes, thank you,
in a close election like 2000, instead of having a recount in Florida, wouldn't you have to recount in a lot of close states?
Well, interestingly enough, what would happen is the states that were close would have to recount. The states that weren't close would not actually technically have to recount. But if you had an exact tie for some reason, 655,429, you had exact tie, then interestingly enough, what happens is we go back to the old system. We go back to winner take all in every state, whatever you had the law before the passage of the National Popular Voting State Compact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Yes, ma'am.
I represent Virginians for Medical Freedom, but since everyone's throwing race around, I'm a minority woman, as you all can see, and I'm in opposition of this bill. Our nation was not created on a whim. It was founded on proven principles dating back to 1014. The genealogy of our Constitution includes the 1100 Charters of Liberty, the Magna Carta, the English Constitution, and so many other foundational documents and works like those of John Locke, which created a nearly perfect and very limited servant government. With lots of scrutiny, this wasn't on a whim, a bunch of white men getting together, we're rich, let's do this. With lots of scrutiny and thought, our framers chose a Republican form of government, not a democracy. We, the people, created government as a servant to stand in for us when we can't. I am here to tell you that you don't have the authority to change a foundational principle that makes up how this republic functions. Going from electoral to popular vote fundamentally changes our system. Our system formed from a Republican form to a government to from a Republican to a democracy, where the mob rules, which is why our founders chose against it. If you believe in the popular vote, you believe in collectivism and in slavery. Let us not forget that the popular vote is what kept slavery alive and well in America, especially in Virginia. Those who want this bill do not truly understand our form of government or our history. They don't love liberty if they are okay with liberty being in the hands of the mob. Your oath of office made the Constitution your job contract, and you became public servants to the people. Anyone who votes for this bill is committing the crime of treason, so be on notice. You cannot claim ignorance of the law of the land, which guarantees to each state a Republican form of government. You are entrusted and paid on the basis of your sworn oath to support and defend it, not to legislate over it, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. John Adams said, Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Where'd you say you were from?
Virginians for Liberty and Justice.
But where do you live?
I'm in Fredericksburg.
Fredericksburg. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Nancy Kolb, and I live in Radford, Virginia, and I'm here to speak in favor of national popular vote. And my reason is a more modern reason, that I believe that a national popular vote is our best defense against computers, Facebook, and foreign powers taking over our elections. Computers are getting so good and getting better every year that they can identify exactly the right 1,000 people that are persuadable and then target those people with misleading Facebook and other media ads. So elections in the modern times have become, to me, a large computer game, and we don't even know what countries are playing. So I believe that if we went to a national popular vote, it would be much harder to find persuadable, gullible voters to target to overturn the will of the majority. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Alan Guest Jr. I live in Boynton, Virginia. That's down Mecklenburg County way. Senator Ruff's my representative. And I'm here to speak against the national popular vote. Power diffused is liberty preserved. And we would want no more someone telling us what car to drive, what color to paint our house. We want someone else telling us who our leaders should be. As was stated, the Electoral College was designed to protect the little guy from the big guy. I believe Franklin once said that a Republican form of government are two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for supper, with the heavily armed sheep contesting the vote. The national popular vote will, as history in some cases has proven, well, all cases has proven, that the majority will then swallow the minority. Thank you.
My name is Joshua Pritikin. I live in Short Pump in Henrico, and I'm here to speak in favor of the national popular vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, my name is Ray Haynes. I'm here on behalf of the National Popular Vote Organization. I did want to answer your question and Senator Reeves' question with respect to recounts and the reporting.
Where do you live?
I'm actually from Sacramento, California.
Okay.
So I served in the Senate of the California legislature. In fact, if you go on to
has California adopted this compact?
Yeah, I was just going to get to that. Okay. If you go on to YouTube, you will find my speech opposing the National Popular Interstate Compact on the floor of the California legislature. I'm a Republican, a conservative Republican, that has come to the conclusion this is what's best for the conservative movement, for the Republican Party, and for the country as a whole. I will say this, to Senator Reeves' question, no state under federal law, states are required by a certain period of time to report their certificates of ascertainment to the federal government, and then those certificates are opened on the counting day in front of Congress. And that procedure is set up. If you get into the Bush v. Gore decision, that came out of the Florida election, they said the certificates of ascertainment are required to be filed 6 days before the meeting of the Electoral College, and it reports the state's vote, and it also reports the awarding of electors.
Senator Spruill's got a question.
Sure.
Did I understand you say that this is best for the conservative, best for the Republican Party as a whole?
That's my conclusion. That's why I support it.
You just made my champion. You just gave me my right to vote, Doc. Heck no, thank you.
No, I didn't intend to do that. That's why I say it's best for the country as a whole. But as a Republican, that's my opinion. That's why I had spoken against it on the floor of the Assembly in California. But the bottom line on the thing, with respect to the recounts, recount law stays in each state as it is. What I want to make this clear because you had made the comment, does this effectively get rid of the Electoral College? And no, it doesn't. In fact, it preserves the Electoral College while at the same time making every single vote in every single state important in every single election. Why is it important to preserve the Electoral College? Is because the Electoral College is what keeps states in charge of election law. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution puts the major authority for determining election law in each of the states. So recount law stays in the hands of the states. So any state which is close enough for a recount will still recount. What Bush versus Gore said was it has to be finished by 6 days before the meeting of the Electoral College. So those are the those technical questions. The last thing I would say is the biggest challenge I know